This is Reverend Casey Carroll. I'm here in Venice. So we're at the Louvre, and the Louvre says, and we're talking about the Sphirot. I want to talk about the G specifically. And so at the center of the Sphirot, it has several different principles. Geburah, strength, where we get Gabriel from. Chesed, where you have God's mercy. It's also faithfulness. When I think of Chesed, the most common way I look at it is when David talks about the faithfulness of the Lord. But it is Chesed God. You know, it's the faithfulness of God, it's His mercies. What you end up seeing is that everywhere we talk about mercy, it lays forth this. But you end up seeing that. When you talk about judgment, Geburah was more than just from Gabriel with strength. There was also His judgment. So when you enter into judgment, you understand that in the Kabbalah, there's two pillars, one of severity and one of mercy. So part of that severity came from Geburah. The other side of it, the pillar of mercy, came from that chesed. And so this also is showing that generally the way that the Sphirot is built up. And the tree of life, as they call it, the Yetz Chaim, Yetz Chai. And so ultimately, the G consists of this, and then also Tiferet. Well, Tiferet is interesting because it mentions the glory of God. And so when you see it speaking about glory, you'll oftentimes see Tiferet. Sometimes you see Kabod, that's also for respect. And it was these three characteristics that were tied together. And they used the acrostic of the GE. And so, anytime that you're reading through the Zohar and you see them mentioning that, that's what it's mentioning, is that Chesed, Geburah, and Tiferet. And of course, you can go into what it ties into. The Tiferet is connected into the Yesod, the foundation of the order. You have Netzah, it's tied out into the right of the tree, and then the Hod down into the left. Hod being on the same pillar of severity, and then on the pillar of mercy, finding Netzah. And so even the timelessness of His mercy built into that Netzah. And so underneath mercy, what you see is timelessness. It's an eternity. And so it's tied into it. And you can look above it. And you can see where you have Chokmah above Chesed, and how it is the wisdom of God goes on forever, as well as His mercy. And then on the opposite side, looking from the pillar of mercy into the pillar of severity, is Binah. Binah is understanding. And so when you see it, what you also find is that through understanding, you're held into judgment. It is to say that if someone didn't understand, then how can I hold them liable for the situation? But once they have that understanding, then they're liable for it. So thus the understanding was actually tied to that Geburah judgment, but also the strength. Through having understanding, it gives us strength. When we understand how the concepts and the principles of this world work, we're able to interact with them in a greater way so that it strengthens us and moves forward into victory ultimately. And these two characters line up into the Keter. It's above Tiferet. So it's interesting because when you look through in the Sefer Yetzirah, and they mention to say, well, there are 10 Sphirot, not 9 and not 11. So not to take one away, either the kingdom or the Malkuth below, the Keter above. But the one that they don't often add and mention sometimes is Doth. Doth was knowledge. So thus it is actually, I was listening to a rabbi speaking about eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And so they pulled it away from the tree. It's not one of the Sphirot, although it actually is a portion and lies above Tiferet, under the Keter. So even that knowledge guides forth under the crown, the King of God. And so when we look at the G, what we find is the heart of the Sphirot. It builds forth the principles of God's glory, of His mercy, of His strength and judgment. And we find that when we look further into it, that each one of the Sphirot is actually built with a Sphirot within itself. And so that this is the heart of it itself, and there also exists within it a G unto each Sphirot. It's kind of complicated. Generally, if you're talking to a Kabbalist and they mention the Zohar, ask them about the G, and they can tell you about the principles at God's heart. This is Reverend Casey Carroll from Venice, saying God bless, and just giving you a little insight into the G. See you.